I have in front of me a number of written questions that have been submitted, but I think in fairness to everybody that has turned up tonight, I'll be taking one question from the floor, then one question from here, alternating, so everybody hopefully gets the opportunity to get their fears, concerns addressed. I propose to take the first question from the floor. So if I could have a show of the hands of someone who wants to go first, and we'll get a microphone to them and send you. If you could please stand, state your name, direct a question to either or both, and hopefully...
Mr. Moderator, I thank you. My name is Adrian Schonfelder. I attended the last debate last week in Geelong, and I must say that was more genteel than tonight's debate. My great-great-grandfather was William Sunderland, and Sunderland Bay is named after my family. I want to ask both of the Minister and Shadow Minister, when will the $30 billion be spent to upgrade the train network if the port is to be built in Hastings?
Minister.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks for the question. Back to my point that I've made throughout the course of the evening, we are doing 4 years of business case, environmental approvals, transport approvals. We are not going to build a next international container port here without good road and rail links. When we get that advice, then what the budget or what it costs to actually implement them works will be a consideration of future budgets. As I said before, the Western Port Highway has been identified as the major road link. That is freeway status down to Cranbourne, coming off a much lower base beyond that, but I understand Vic Roads are doing some work in and around that. Equally with the rail corridors, I'm told in the medium long term you've got capacity there as population grows, as Melbourne grows, as our freight and logistics sector grows. Any government will have to look at the investing to deal with that capacity. So short answer to your question is once we get that information that guides us in decision making and policy, we'll run it through government budgetary processes to look at funding them and then prioritising and working out where that funding should go. But you will need good road and rail access for any port.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it really highlights the fact that this is a major infrastructure investment, if not one of the biggest that this state has ever seen in terms of the location of the second container port. And it's not just the nominal figure of, when I say just, I mean that doesn't not the right word, but the nominal figure of $12 billion does not cover the rail and road connections, or we don't know that it covers because a business plan hasn't been released in advance before the decision was made to proceed. So the figure of $30 billion for a rail link is startling. It could be correct, I'm not 100% sure. But I do know that you can't build a container port without the right landside connections, and I've said that over and over again tonight, and I think it does draw the attention of the room to just how big of an investment and just how important it is that we can't get it wrong.
A question from me comes from a Carolyn Gleixner, who nominates herself as a Labour candidate for Nepean. You mentioned before, Minister, that the container ships don't hang around. If they don't hang around, how will this generate jobs for Hastings locals and give extra businesses to local shops? There's a second part to that question as to, do you have any idea what specific number and what sort of jobs can you guarantee for Hastings locals?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. The freight logistics sector to the Victorian economy is worth somewhere between $19 to $23 billion per annum. So there's jobs, investment, spending, all comes with that. The ships coming in and unloading and reloading is the ship, I guess from your question you're talking about, will the crews get off and buy a sandwich or a coffee or something? And they will, they probably will, but the jobs would be in the stevedoring, in the transport, in moving the containers on and off the ships, taking them to the distribution centres. We're already seeing investment in Lyndhurst, in and around that area of intermodal links to get freight too. There's jobs there, there's construction jobs, you know. There'll be construction jobs in the port, there'll be jobs in operations of the port. There are jobs in the transport and logistics sector. You're literally talking thousands and thousands of jobs. And to the community here at Hastings, I think Neil, talking to your local member here, Neil Burgess, is, since Neil's been in, I think Balti zoned the land in and around Hastings in the 1960s. So the port development's been talked about for many, many years. And a lot of people are saying, well, where is it? Is it finally going to happen? You've already got 100 people at the Port of Hastings Development Authority. I'm sure that they're actually giving business locally when they actually shop here, buy here, bank here, have meetings here, etc. So the flow-on effect, the ripple effect, the multiplier effect will be staggering. Hence the freight and logistics sector is worth that $19 to $23 billion to the Victorian economy. So please don't assume it's just the ships coming with their crews, and if they're just dropping off and picking up, that they're not spending money here. I'm sure they spend some money here too, but the jobs and employment will be in the stevedoring companies, in the transport companies, and many of those, I'm sure, will live locally or in the region. So that's where the jobs will come from.
Minister.
I'm glad that you touched on the issue of Neil Burgess's, the member for Hastings, support for the project, because whilst you constantly have said tonight that the policy of Labor has changed, which is correct, it has changed, certainly the policy of the local member has certainly changed, because he's on record in the Parliament at least 7 times talking and bagging out the proposal for a container port at Hastings. In fact, he's been on the record saying that the infrastructure needs to come first with any sort of project, that the rail systems into this area don't support a container port. So it doesn't sound like he's been on board with the project all the way through.
On point to the question answered in relation to the local jobs then.
Well, and in relation to jobs, I've got to say, there are other options for this area, and I don't think that this government's had a good hard look at those because they've been obsessed with a container port. And why have they been obsessed with a container port? Is it because they want to live up to the Balti legend of the 1960s? I don't know. I don't know what the reasons are. Or is there a secret deal behind the scenes that when the container port falls over because it's a dud, that they want to ship brown coal out of the port? Is that really what the agenda is?
I'll take a question.
Can I just rebuff, Gordon, just
yes.
in buff on behalf of Neil Burgess. Neil Burgess is a great champion for the local region down here, and Neil's right. He in asking for improvements to transport and transport links, of course he's going to argue that. And that's, we're not discounting that. I never discounted that we're not going to build a port and not have a road or a train to go to it. Neil will advocate for improvements and the associated improvements that come with that. So I've got no problems with Neil coming up and banging on our door. We're not just groupthink, Natalie, where you sit in caucus and what your leader says you do. We have some good, robust discussions and debates. Now, I think good debate makes for good decision making. And Neil was a champion for his local community. He continues to do a good job down here. And I think if you looked at the list of things he's delivered down here, he is worthy, one person that is worthy of a job.
Question from the floor, please.
Would you speak into the microphone, please?
My question is to David. One of your first statements, and I wrote them down, quote, was Hastings will be a container port. Any studies will find. Now, I always thought that you did studies and then made decisions. I didn't think that you did it the other way around. You're spending $110 billion basically to find out that it is going to happen, whereas any environmental effect statement anyway would surely show that it should never happen here. It isn't a natural deep water port, whatever you say.
Is there a question in there, please, for the Minister?
Yes. Why haven't you thought of Portland? Why aren't we hearing Portland talked about? It's on the right side of Melbourne. Transport links would be easy. It is a natural deep water port and would provide a hell of a lot of jobs for people who be for Portland?
Thanks for the question, Inga. Portland has been considered as an option. It's not viable with the distance it is from Melbourne as a container port. It is a key port, along with Geelong, with links to regional and rural Victoria. It is going gangbusters in terms of its mineral sands, timber, chip, all those things that go through Portland. It's not a container port. It's not viable as a container port. It has been considered as a container port. You're right, the point that you made. We're not Labor. We don't just say, let's build a desal plant without any planning whatsoever. We will go through 4 years and we'll be guided by the decision making. If that decision making says that you need to consider these transport links or that transport links, that will guide our decision making, our policy. If it says you shouldn't have your berthing works here or there, or it'll guide us on where they should be. We're not going to waste public taxpayers' money of 110 million plus over a 4-year period, like Labor, going through the motions of a predetermined outcome. This will have to meet all state and federal, all state. We'll work through the process.
You said
Yes, we'll work through the process.
Are your words, quote, it will be a container port?
We'll have a container port here. We won't have bitumen or coal or urea or chemicals of what Natalie said you'd have tonight. We will develop it as a container port.
You said that. You said that.
In the past, every one of those by the local community,
didn't.
they are not on the board at all.
Sorry?
Urea, bitumen, all those things have come and gone and been rejected in the past.
Yeah, and we're going to develop it as our preference is to develop it as a second international container port.
I
Not as a
have one
liquid
follow-up question.
break bulk
In
port.
fairness to everybody who has a question, I think, we lose control of the debate this way. A question for myself comes in 3-part. Can either speaker give an indication of the likely growth in container import-exports? Part 2, from this, can they advise when a new port will need to become operational, and what is the lead time to ensure that the operational deadline will be achieved? Natalie, if you take first response, please.
That's a really good question because we are in dispute about the time frames of which a second container port would be needed. There is a difference between the two speakers at the front here. And I've got to say, things have changed over the last 3 years in the freight sector, in that the GFC has had an effect on slowing down the sector. We've certainly once had the situation of around 6 to 7% growth per year in the industry, and that's since declined by about 3%. So realistic expectation of growth for container volumes looks to have declined by around the 3% mark. So when you combine that with the current works of capacity that are being done at the Port of Melbourne, and you look at the projections of both the growth of the population and how things are handled in and out of the port currently, there is time. There is time for us to have a look. And I would say that we have capacity to continue at the Port of Melbourne for quite some time, and that really we don't need a second container port up and running in the short time frames that the government is committing to.
Minister.
Thanks, Gordon. I would argue that, look, you ask 10 people what trade forecasts are there, you get 10 different answers. The facts are that Port of Melbourne trade's been growing about 6.2% over the past period. Still strong growth. We last year, I think the Port of Melbourne did 2.58 million containers. With our port capacity project down there at Webb Dock and at Swanson Dock, that'll increase capacity by about 1 million containers. We reckon, current views, the experts of Melbourne will reach a capacity of about 5, maybe 5 million containers, unless you do what we've suggested earlier, unless you move the Tasmanian trade, the Coot Island facility, the car trade, auto trade, and whether you do substantial other things to increase Melbourne. Generally, it's accepted that it'll be about 5.1 million. Our trades are up and down. Current forecasts would have, we're saying late 2020s, early 2030s. 2030 seems to be the year that most industry experts or specialists say that Melbourne will start to reach capacity. And so if you don't do something about capacity in that time frame, if you don't have a port ready to start taking some containers around that time frame, then you'll lose trade. Now, it's not about building Hastings to take 9 million containers. It must be operational for 9 million from day one. It's about having capacity to take some trade as Melbourne maxes out. Otherwise, it's a very competitive industry. You would lose trade to Brisbane and Sydney along the east coast. And once you lose it, you'd never ever get it back. And think of the impact that would have to the Victorian state economy and to jobs and investment here. There are some, and Sandy Galbraith, I think, said tonight, maritime analyst, some would say we're not going fast enough. I've got some quotes here where Victoria's run out of time to evaluate potential port locations, risk losing trade to ports in Sydney and Brisbane, Hastings needed to be developed without delay, shipping industry doesn't want Bay West, there's a lot of trucking companies that are not great. Interested in that, the international shipping market's moving at such a pace that Melbourne's going to get lost in the wake of what's going on. So there are some that will say, we've got a bit of time. There's others will say, get on with it or you're going to be left behind. The one thing we agree on, one thing Natalie and I agree on, Liberal Labor agree on, is that we are going to need a second international container port. What the debate is around is where that port should be and over what time frame. I contest the work's been done. I contest there's nothing to be gained by doing further work and analysis. That has all been done. Decisions need to be made. Then if you want to argue, does it need to be come on for late 2020s or 2030s or mid-2030s, well then that's another discussion again. But we are going to need a port, and it's at some point in time going to have to be ready to take containers because Melbourne is going to max out.
Thank you, Minister. Question from the floor, gentleman in third row. Thanks, Andrew.
That's all right. Natalie, I've been following this issue quite closely, and I'm on the participating group. Reading your policies, I can't see you committing one way or the other. And, given that 8 years ago, just before the election, Steve Bracks came in and shut the Western Port net fishery, which was sustainable. There was 15 local jobs, when only months earlier he'd committed to supporting the industry. I'm just wondering, is there going to be, if you win this election, will you change your mind suddenly? That's what I want to know.
Thanks for the question. I think I've been pretty clear tonight in talking about one of our key strategies that we're taking forward to the next election, and that's to establish an organisation called Infrastructure Victoria. Now, they're not just going to be tasked with the investigation of the second container port. They're to do an assessment on all of the major infrastructure that is required for the state. And as the Minister said himself, and other people have made comments to me earlier tonight, that some of the politics needs to be taken out of it. And I acknowledge, in a 4-year cycle of politics, we do make commitments on both sides that are only 4 years ahead. And really, this is a decision that needs to be made for the next 25, 50, 75, 100 years. So, am I going to change my mind, or is my government, my party, going to change its position after we take government? No, we are not. We are still going to work towards establishing Infrastructure Victoria. In fact, we've said that it's one of our priority pieces of legislation to come in. Now, we have to cop the risks of setting up an independent organisation like this that will make decisions and recommendations to government that take us way beyond one term of government. But I believe that the independence of such an organisation should be at the forefront of the decision making for infrastructure.
Gordon, Tim Pallas's ministerial message in the Port of Hastings Land Use Transport Study as little back as August 2009 said, and I quote, these are not my words, this is Tim Pallas's words as the Minister for Port. The Port of Hastings is well positioned to serve as Melbourne's second container port. Located to the southeast of Melbourne, Hastings has the potential to efficiently meet the freight demands of this rapidly growing region, as well as accommodate a significant portion of the broader Melbourne freight task when the Port of Melbourne reaches capacity. No other port location offers the same overall advantages as Hastings, and it holds major economic potential for the state of Victoria. Consequently, there is a fundamental need to plan and prepare now for the future development to ensure that the opportunity is not built out or lost to alternative uses. I argue again that the work has been done under the previous government of 11 years. under 4 years under us. There's nothing to be gained by wasting time to fund infrastructure in Victoria, however that's going to cost or whoever's going to be on that. Your mates at the CMFEU will probably make the decision. You know, the time is running out for us to get on and develop a container port. Otherwise, Melbourne is going to max out at capacity. We are not going to have facilities here for further container trade. We will lose it to lose it to Sydney and Brisbane, and that would be devastating to the state economy.
Thank you. Question from the Chair. I have a question in front of me in relation to a referral.
Is getting information out there, getting correct, factual, accurate information out there so the community can be well informed. Don't have to agree with us and disagree with us, but to get that information out. So if that's not happening, I'd be interested in that. Certainly Neil Burgess, your local member here, I think Neil would be in contact with me or my office on a weekly, if not fortnightly basis, getting information for people, getting that information back to people. So I can categorically say there has been no direction whatsoever, nor have I heard that the Port of Hastings Development Authority has shut down any information at all. If that was to be the case, that would be a great concern, and I'm more than happy to work with you to go and say to them, what the heck's going on? It's about getting information out there, not hiding information. The other thing to be aware of, this is a long game. This is not a one day, 1 week process. Some of this planning has been undertaken over a number of years. So if we don't know the answer, we'll tell you. We haven't got that information, or as soon as that information comes to light, we're happy to work with your group. I have a number of groups that write to me. I write back to them, correspond to them. My contact details are readily known out there, so that will continue. So thank you for that feedback, and I'll ensure that that's not happening.
Question from the floor.
May I address this to Minister Hodgett? Given that the worldwide shipping companies make their own decisions about freight markets, not ports, has there been research into the possibility that having dredged, the shipping companies may decide not to come to Hastings as the Victorian market may be considered too small for 16-metre draft vessels? And has the Port of Hastings explored an early commitment from shipping lines that this will not be the case?
Thank you for the question. The Port of Melbourne has two challenges. And one is access. In relation to the capacity, we're doing the 1.6 billion port capacity project, and that, as I said before, will take capacity through the 5 million, and depending on Natalie or my view, that could last the next 5, 10, 15 years or beyond, depending on trade forecasts. So that, in the short term, capacity has been dealt with. At some point in time, we'll need a port to take additional capacity. So that's a given. We agree on that. At some point in time, we'll need a port to take additional capacity. All the shipping industries, all the shipping lines are telling us that bigger ships will come. As we won't see the major, massive ones. I don't think we'll see those on our routes. But ships it'll tear down as those bigger ships get on the major trade routes. They don't just park those other ships and say, oh, we don't need you anymore. They're an asset. They'll tear down because it's more cost effective to bring. If you bring 6,000 containers on one ship as opposed to 2 ships or 3 ships or whatever the case, it is more cost efficient and effective. In fact, a jury report have indicated there would be savings per container bringing them in on bigger ships. Whereas I think a figure that Natalie quoted before was plucked out that a container would go up by $400. I've never heard that one. That's a new one to me. Happy to have a look at that. So all the shipping companies are telling us the bigger ships will come. Now we won't see the massive ones, but we'll see the ones that will need to be, they'll be longer, they'll be deeper, they'll be wider, and simply will not be able to access the Port of Melbourne without those significant works that I've talked about. Even under current conditions at Port of Melbourne, there's height restrictions around Westgate Bridge. The swing basin in Melbourne's 300 metres long. Ships coming in now are 297 metres long. So there's issues there with the Port of Melbourne already. Now I say, well, there's arguments put forward, the big ships won't come, the big ships won't come. Why do you think they come? Well, I say don't listen to Natalie or don't listen to me. Go and talk to the shipping and industry experts. Now also go and have a look at Brisbane and Sydney that are both gearing up for larger ships. So they wouldn't be doing that. They wouldn't be investing in accommodating bigger ships if they did not think they would come. So all the advice, all the information is that they will come. Stevedores would gear up. They would be coming tomorrow. I was at Brisbane last month and I tested. I said to the Port of Brisbane, throw it up there, I said, what's your view on the big ships? And he said, we would see the 8,000 container ships coming to Brisbane by as soon as 2015 if we could accommodate them.
Thanks.
If I can make just a very quick comment on that. I know other people want to ask questions, but Minister, you did go and see the big shipping companies last year with the Premier, and you did ask about using Hastings, so I'm surprised that you haven't been honest in putting that out there.
That's not
And
correct. That's not correct.
Then someone's lying to me.
That is not correct. I've never gone and seen a shipping company with the Premier, and I've never asked about contractual arrangements or any of the picture. That's factually incorrect, Natalie. I categorically deny that. That's incorrect.
The managing director of a major shipping company told me that you and the Premier visited, asked about the Port of Hastings, and also took Lindsay Fox along with you as a property developer.
That is not correct, Natalie. I mean, geez, if you have to come to the community of Hastings for a debate on our different policies on ports, and you want to muddy the waters with Lindsay Fox and infactual meetings that don't occur, you know, jeepers, why don't you go and look, stick to the facts. The people of the community here deserve the truth.
I've got a question here, and there's a bit of a preamble, but there's an acceptance by the author of the question that legislation has been passed by the government banning the export of coal from Hastings. So we're starting with that preamble, is that correct?
There's not legislation, I don't think. My understanding, and I'm happy to check this, Gordon, is that you, through the Governor and Council, there is regulations about what can go in and out of port. I've ensured the regulations do not permit coal to go in and out of the Port of Hastings.
Okay.
Now, I'll get the correct terminology or fact about what that's called. It's not legislation that's through the House that has to pass both Houses of Parliament, but it is a gazetted process. Happy to check that and get the facts to you.
Yeah, my understanding is
So the result is
December of last year the coal was ruled out
Correct.
as a potential export.
Correct, but it's not legislation through the Parliament that achieved that outcome. That was an outcome that I delivered, and in fact, again, Neil Burgess was a strong advocate to make sure that that was in the document.
Okay, the concern is, and as I said, there's a little bit of a preamble to this. On the 4th of June 2014, at the Rural and Regional Committee in Wonthaggi, the Grid Group explained they wanted to exploit the 30 billion tonnes of lignite resource. Shanghai and other cities plagued by air pollution need the low sulphur ash of Victoria's coal. A $25 million grant given by the Neptune government to Shanghai Electric, who owns the Waikro power station in Shanghai, to produce briquettes. The question, conceding that an undertaking has been given by your government last year, what approvals or legislation would need to change to export brown coal lignite as either bulk or briquettes in containers or bulk from either BlueScope Steel and or the Port of Hastings now and into the future?
Sure. That's not, I'm not aware of the detail of what you've gone through there, certainly hasn't come through me. We've put in place a mechanism that will preclude, categorically preclude coal going in and out of Hastings. In terms of future legislation, future governments, they can make decisions on that, but the current government, us, we're precluding coal going in and out of Hastings. There's no arrangements, no discussions, no secret meetings, no secret documents that are contrary to that position.
Thanks, Minister. Natalie?
I just wanted to say, when I was asked the question about supporting bulk into the future here at Hastings, that the vision in my head is certainly the vision that I've seen visiting the site, and that is supporting the big farm wind turbines that are being brought in and out through there, rather than anything to do with coal. So there are no plans on this side of politics for that.
Okay, thank you. I intend to take 2 more questions from the floor because of time restraints. There's one question down the back. A show of hands, there's a gentleman sitting behind Mr Neil Burgess over there who has the second. Given on times and the availability of the ministers, we will see what other questions we can get through.
My question is for Minister Hodgett. My name's Graham Hannigan. I'm a resident of Cannons Creek, the Salt Marsh, and the mangroves in my backyard, literally. The definition, as I understand, of a deep water port, natural deep water port, is one that can accommodate a Panamax ship without dredging. You've admitted that Port of Hastings will need dredging, so how do you justify continually, you and your colleagues, calling it a natural deep water port when it quite clearly isn't? Is this deliberate misleading the public to try and get public approval? I'd like to hear your definition of a natural deep water port, because I think my front lawn under a heavy dew probably qualifies. Thank you.
Graham, thanks for the question. The reason we're choosing Hastings is because it's an existing deep ship channel. I mean, I'll go back to my answer before, and well, I'll give you, I'll give you the facts that are before me, and we can have a look at the chart. I'm happy to do that. But the average depth of the main shipping channel up to Long Island Point's 22.5 metres deep. The average, the definition of a deep water port is to be able to accommodate ships of what ships need to get in or visit Australian ports with minimal or limited dredging. So the average depth of the channel from Long Island Point to where the new wharf would be is likely to be constructed in Hastings is 15.7 metres, and there's that 2.8 metres of tidal range. Now the reason we are saying Hastings is our preferred option, because the alternative is, it's clear, it's fact that the ships of the future will not be able to get into Port Phillip Bay. Because Port Phillip Bay is only 14 metres deep. You can walk across to Point Wilson. So there's massive environmental damage there. I'm happy to get the chart, and in fact I think someone said there's one up the back, the one by the maritime specialist up the back.
I did email you this question 3 weeks ago. I'm still waiting for a response. I've also almost daily been asking Neil Burgess on his Facebook page the same question for 2 weeks. I've still got no response.
That's not true.
Well, Graham, coming down here tonight, I mean, as you do, I'm sure Natalie did a similar thing. I asked, my office, was there any outstanding correspondence to anyone down here, and the answer is no, it's all been responded to. So if I'll give you my mobile number. If you think there's an unanswered letter that you've written to me we haven't responded to, I'm happy to chase that up. But in relation to what you're asking, I can only go on the basis of what the information that's been given to me. And if we want to have a look at the chart, we can test that. The information that is given to me at the moment, and we'll continue to look at where the berthing operations would be. But yes, you will need some dredging at the berthing. You need some dredging in and around the swing basin. But the main shipping channel is a deep water channel.
The Minister has given you the opportunity to speak to him after the meeting. I think in fairness to the Minister, that might be an appropriate response to that gentleman's question. Gentleman over there behind Mr Burgess.
Good day, my name's Justin Carter. I've got a simple question to both of you. Will, at the end of the day, regardless of where the mooted port is to be placed, will we as taxpayers of Victoria have the opportunity to have a look at how those decisions have been made and how our monies have been spent by elected representatives of us without being disguised by something called commercial incompetence? Because I think at the point here where we're at is that we have so many things going on, and recently a tunnel was elected and we need to have a desal done, but so much of that is disappointing to us, and I don't know if I can speak for all of you, but certainly for myself. I'm so disappointed in our representatives because there is this commercial incompetence, which it seems to me a guise of not being able to competently manage our funds. Thank you.
Justin, thanks for the question. Look, part of Natalie and I coming down to the debate tonight was to try and share information and be open with the community, and we'll continue to filter information out and do exactly what you're offering. But we face the people every 4 years, fixed 4-year terms, and we're judged on that. I would put to you that we are a government that is open, we are accountable, we deliver major projects on time or on budget or under time and on budget. I would suggest to you, I could name any number of projects currently that we're working on that are under budget, that are delivering good outcomes for Victorians because they're under budget or under time, unlike the previous Labor government of 11 years that had mismanagement, a cost blowout, whether it be diesel, whether it be Mikey, whether it be the smart meters, whether it be the IT systems. There was just story after story after story now. And again, Natalie and I could, on our respective parties, could debate that all night here. I'd invite you to have a look at some of the Ombudsman's reports or some of the Auditor General report around the poor performance of Labor governments delivering failure to deliver on major projects.
If we could keep to question, that sounds like a closing address, which we will get to in just a minute.
Can't help myself. We'll continue to make information available and invite you to work through Neil or myself or the Port Hastings Development Authority to have your information needs sought.
What happened to that?
Well, East West will be a business case for.
Where is it?
It's being developed.
Oh, it's being developed.
We'll keep to point. Natalie, was there any response to the question? Thank you.
And I hear your concerns, and I'd just like to reiterate our position on Infrastructure Victoria with the purposes of that body taking up some of your concerns, in that we need to take the politics out of our major decision-making of infrastructure, and to also get them to do the research and make recommendations about what the priorities for the state should be. Someone said to me after the debate last Monday night that the winner of the debate last Monday night will be decided on the 29th of November. Probably the same way it'll be decided tonight. But I just make that point because really people do have a choice, and it's called the ballot box.
Thank you.
It's still
Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately time restraints precludes any more questions being asked. I would ask the Minister to make his closing statement, limited to 3 minutes each, if we may. Close.
Thanks, Gordon. Victoria is the nation's freight logistics capital, and what we all agree on is a second container port is needed at some point in time for Victoria. We all agree that this is an issue of state significance. Labor knew Hastings was the best option when in government, and only Hastings can be built within the time frame to avoid a capacity gap. Their proposal to delay, to send it back to another body to have another look at, and promote Bay West is going to add an extra 5 years or so to what stage Hastings is currently at. And I believe it will never happen in environmental grounds over in Port Phillip Bay. The cost of delay is $1 billion every year. Hastings is the best option and has a number of advantages that we've been mentioned. It's an operating port, has been for over 50 years, has land zone in and around it. Regardless of our debating where the shipping channel is, it has a shipping channel that is deeper than what would be needed for Bay West to be delivered. It has 3,000 hectares of land at the port already zoned for port-related use. Labor's Bay West option is flawed. It won't work. There's been no compelling case for it that's been made of putting it above or beyond Hastings as the preferred option for the next international container port. I put to you that Hastings is the only choice for Victoria's next container port. The issue is too important for political point scoring. Labor, when in government, knew that this was the best option, have not to date put forward any reason why they did the backflip on there. They can't be trusted on this. And finally, can I just again thank Natalie for accepting the challenge to come and have a debate and have a discussion about this, both in Geelong and here. And can I thank the local communities here for putting on tonight's debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Natalie.
I think I've made a lot of points tonight and probably made a lot of points over and over, so I'm not going to take the full 3 minutes because people look tired. And I do want to say that I was quite concerned about the terms of the debate because I actually think it's a bit boring watching a shadow and a minister ask each other questions for an hour. I would have much preferred to have had a longer period of questions from the floor, because I think when you come to a community, you really want to hear what are the major concerns from that community. So I want to thank you all for coming tonight and putting some of those views across loud and clear. I still would like to see a lot more information out in the public domain about the effects of this second container port, and for the government to reconsider its push forward on doing that. And as I said earlier, for those of you that feel very strongly about it, please talk to your neighbours, talk to your friends. And as I said, you do have a choice, and it's going to happen on the 29th of November. So thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Just in relation to that point, I believe you did agree to the terms of the debate prior to it commencing tonight.
After 3 weeks of negotiation.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance tonight. My congratulations to the Western Port Chamber of Commerce for arranging this evening. I'll just hand over to them at the moment as they wish to make a couple of presentations. Thank you.
Just want to thank everybody for coming along this evening, and I've just got a small gift for both the ministers and the board and charterers for moderating the evening. So thank you very much. And
Minister, a maritime expert.